Welcome to another Explainer. Today, we're diving into something truly fascinating. We are looking closely at a collection of theological texts and source materials that detail the mechanics of a hidden spiritual war. You see, according to these Islamic traditions, the world we see every day, it's really only half the story. Running parallel to our lives is this massive, highly organized, and deeply sinister network. It's essentially the secret government of Iblis, or Satan, and his army of jinns. So we're going to unpack exactly how this unseen syndicate operates, how it gathers intelligence, and the profound theological defenses believers use to protect themselves. Let's get right into it.
To start us off, I want you to think about a relatable mystery. Have you ever heard a crazy story about someone going to a psychic, maybe a tarot card reader or a fortune teller, and the psychic suddenly reveals a deeply personal secret, something they couldn't possibly have known? It's the kind of phenomenon that leaves people completely stunned. Well, okay, let's dive into this, because the source texts we are examining today provide a highly specific, mechanical explanation for exactly how this happens. And spoiler alert, it has absolutely nothing to do with a fortune teller having magical powers.
Here's the deal. According to the texts, the fortune teller themselves has some kind of, actually scratch that, they have absolutely zero intrinsic power, no psychic ability whatsoever. Instead, they are simply the human endpoint of a massive, unseen network of espionage, literally an espionage ring. What you are witnessing when a soothsayer gets a prediction right is actually the result of a coordinated intelligence-gathering operation by demonic entities. The fortune teller relies entirely on this unseen government passing them stolen information. Let's move to and see how this builds, because the mechanics of this operation are incredibly detailed in the traditions. Think of it like a cosmic vertical heist. Step 1. Angels up in the heavens receive and speak decrees about what is going to happen down on Earth. Step 2. Demonic entities, or jinns, physically stack themselves, one on top of the other, reaching all the way up toward the heavens just to eavesdrop on the angels. Step 3. Once a jinn at the very top manages to snatch a single word of truth, they quickly pass it down that chain of demons. And finally, step 4, that stolen piece of intel is whispered directly into the ear and eventually the lips of the earthly sorcerer or fortune teller.
But there is a massive catch here. The texts outline a very strict theological ratio regarding the stolen intelligence. By the time that one single piece of truth makes its way down the chain from the heavens all the way to the earth, the devils don't just hand it over purely, no way. For every one truth they manage to steal, they mix in exactly 100 lies. The source material quotes the tradition directly on this. It says they drop it into the ear of a fortune teller and they add 100 lies to it. This is the core strategy of their deception. When the fortune teller speaks to a person, they present this massive web of 100 fabricated lies. But hidden right inside it is that one stolen truth. And when that one true event actually happens, the human mind is hooked. The person completely ignores the 100 lies and totally believes the fortune teller's entire fabricated narrative, thinking they possess some kind of ultimate knowledge. Now, what the sources describe here is not just a loose collection of ghosts or spirits causing random chaos. Not at all. It is portrayed as Iblis's centralized syndicate. It functions like a highly organized, heavily militarized, corporate-like structure. This unseen government has rigid ranks, strict hierarchies, deployed missions, and a centralized reporting system where human activity is continuously, and I mean relentlessly, tracked and manipulated. This brings us to a truly fascinating concept mentioned explicitly in the Bengali source texts, Iblis's index. The texts describe what is essentially a centralized demonic database, an index where human targets are heavily tracked. It notes that in the unseen realm, these records are often sorted and identified by the name of the target's mother. So when an earthly sorcerer performs black magic or casts a spell, the demons are literally checking in with this central network to update the index, ensuring that the target is actively monitored and manipulated by the syndicate. It's incredibly systematic. So what is the primary goal of all this tracking and manipulation? The texts are absolutely clear that the ultimate prize for this demonic army is creating discord, particularly the separation of spouses. The sources mention a tradition where demons report back to Iblis with their daily deeds, like a daily status meeting. If a demon says, "Hey, I caused someone to steal," or "I made them lie," Iblis is totally unimpressed. But if a demon reports that they successfully caused a husband and wife to separate, Iblis brings that demon close and highly rewards them. It just goes to show how this syndicate specifically targets the foundational bonds of human society.
To tap into this network, humans use all sorts of different methods. The sources list numerous earthly props: Reading sand, looking at tea leaves left in a cup, using numerology, throwing items into iron pots, or reading tarot cards. The absolute crucial takeaway here is that regardless of the physical prop being used, the unseen mechanism remains exactly the same. The cards or the tea leaves, they have no power. None. They are merely physical theater for the stolen information being whispered by those demonic eavesdroppers. Because this unseen espionage is considered a direct challenge to divine authority, the consequences for humans interacting with it are severe. The texts state that merely going to a fortune teller, even just for fun, just as a joke, triggers a strict mathematical penalty. Your prayers are blocked for exactly 40 days. You still have to perform your prayers, but you receive absolutely no spiritual reward for them for over a month. And this brilliantly illustrates the gravity of the spiritual war at play here. The sources draw a sharp, unmistakable contrast between two levels of engagement. Reading a horoscope or watching a psychic from your entertainment, that gets your prayers blocked for 40 days. But actually believing what the fortune teller says, that carries the ultimate theological penalty. The texts state that whoever believes the soothsayer has fundamentally disbelieved in the revelation sent down to the Prophet Muhammad, because believing the psychic means you believe someone other than God has access to the unseen, which completely shatters the core tenet of the faith. Okay, so if there is a highly organized, unseen syndicate actively tracking and attacking humans, how do believers fight back? You can't just do nothing, right? The source texts dedicate significant time to the defense mechanisms, primarily focusing on the practice of ruqya. This is the spiritual countermeasure used to dismantle unseen attacks and genuinely protect the targeted individual. The sources draw a very firm line between genuine defense and falling right back into the enemy's trap. Genuine ruqya involves Quranic healing. It relies entirely on God, strengthens the person's faith, and is considered the only valid defense. This is heavily contrasted with using occult amulets or going to a quote-unquote good sorcerer to undo magic. The texts warn that using magic to fight magic fundamentally ruins a person's faith. In fact, it actually connects them right back into the very demonic network they are trying to escape in the first place. The mechanics of ruqya are straightforward, but spiritually profound. It involves the repetitive recitation of specific verses. According to the texts, these verses act as a direct spiritual countermeasure that literally breaks the hold of the demonic index. It essentially severs the network connection the demons have established on the target. But more importantly than just feeling better, ruqya is described not just as a physical cure, but as a deeply necessary treatment to protect the immortal soul. And speaking of the soul, the Bengali texts spend time deeply philosophizing about this, the soul, or the ruh. They explain that our physical bodies, the buildings we live in, the flesh we occupy, all of it will decay in 100 years. It's temporary. But the ruh is immortal. It is a direct command from the Lord. It endures far beyond the grave, through the day of judgment and into eternity. The texts argue that this unseen government of Iblis is ultimately targeting this eternal ruh. Therefore, the spiritual defenses of ruqya are absolutely essential to protect the only part of you that lasts forever. To summarize the absolute core argument of these sources against the demonic syndicate, we have to look at this powerful theological quote from the texts. No one in the heavens and the earth knows the unseen except Allah. This single concept is the ultimate weapon against the 100 lies of the fortune tellers. It entirely shatters the illusion that the demonic syndicate has any real power or true knowledge of the future. Their entire operation is just a massive, deceptive heist. It's a fascinating look at how these traditions view the mechanics of the spiritual world, isn't it? It's not just abstract forces floating around, it's an organized espionage network battling for eternal stakes. Based on the detailed warnings in these sources, it leaves us with a provocative final thought. If the unseen world is truly this organized, structured, and relentless in its tracking, are you doing enough to protect your permanent soul? Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep questioning what lies just beyond the veil.